Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, UX Design for the Metaverse with Lionel Chok. My name is Marina Zakhatska, and I'm the co-founder and curator of Immersive Design Academy, which is the knowledge hub and the hub for community for experts practicing in the field of immersive design and technology. And today we have our amazing guest speaker, Lionel Chok, who will be talking on the topic of UX design for the Metaverse. Lionel is the true immersive design pioneer. He's the founder of the company called Immersive and the chief Metaverse Officer of Hatten Land, a company in Singapore. And he's building the Metaverse called WorldX. Lionel is also a Forbes Asia contributor and a committee member for AR and VR in SINGRAPH for Southeast Asia. Welcome, Lionel. Thanks for joining us today. Just before we begin our fireside chat, which will last for about 30 minutes, a quick note to the audience. We will open the floor for Q&A in the second part of the event that would last for about 15 minutes. Let's begin. Lionel,
Hi.
Chief Metaverse Officer, let's break the ice on this. What is that you actually do?
Hey, hi everybody. Thanks again for the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. We thought of a title when we started, development of what would be interesting for people to ask, what are you doing? What are you building? And I guess when I took on a role in December last year, there weren't many Chief Metaverse Officer titles around. It was really a conversation starter and opener for many people to ask, and a way for me to introduce, hey, we're building a virtual platform that will have these USPs or these things that you can experience. And the conversation would very naturally go on from there. So in essence, you can think of the role as more of a CTO, but specifically looking at the Metaverse development itself. And today, I think because Metaverse and Web3 is such a broad and new topic, I also want to quickly put up a disclaimer is the fact that I don't think I know everything. I have a journey from XR for the last 6 years, which I think would be quite valuable for me to share some of the knowledge or the experience. And so I think that's pretty much where we're coming from in terms of the immersive design and how that flows into the Metaverse. But back to the title, basically, I have to look after the current development of the platform and all the associated components and elements that come into it. And as you know, today, these will be buzzwords and terms that you probably would have heard a lot of, like blockchain, NFTs, decentralization, cryptocurrencies, and all that.
Okay, awesome. So speaking about what brought you to this point, you have such an interesting background and you probably worked in every field of XR that the world's seen today. So could you maybe tell us through this journey and maybe explain how you've seen the evolution of design being driven and affected by the development of immersive technologies?
Sure, yeah. I think also a very interesting tidbit to share as well. That's also how we got connected when we were doing our postgrad in London. So I think at the time, it was 2014, 2015. I took on, something which I thought was quite fun because it was very new. And I think the most important thing was it was very visual. So coming from a non-tech background, basically I was looking at how to switch into a career in tech, but yet not get bothered and encumbered by a lot of the coding, which I didn't have a foundation in. And because of my media background, a lot of stuff was spent looking at visuals. So during the time in the upskilling of tech skills, in the postgrad days, one of the things that I think I was very fortunate to actually be looked into was how we see augmentation and virtualization as one of those technologies that's up and coming. I think timing was also quite a thing around, where this opportunity came about, because at the particular year when I was doing this module, Facebook acquired Oculus, Apple acquired Metaio, that soon came into being ARKit, and then there was an explosion of interest in augmented reality and virtual reality. And suddenly there's a lot of attention that's being put into this particular area. The 5 years since completing the postgrad, starting immersively as a startup, and having developed custom bespoke applications for many companies over the years, has really been an eye-opener in terms of how to best think about the user designs when somebody put on a headset or somebody use a tablet or phone to drop augmentation. I think most of our attendees today would have some kind of experience with AR, MR, VR. So you know that MR and VR, for example, is nothing like a flat screen UI like you find in mobile and tablet. And because of that, it's almost like a whole new school of thought in terms of, should it be spherical? And in design, we talk about affordance, how something as a symbol would represent almost like a real thing. In PC and in laptops and Windows, we see this component being like a trash bin in your PC, which is understandably to humans means that that's where you put all your trash files. Similarly to real life, where you put all your trash. So some of these things might not or might work, when you translate it to immersive design within the XR space. At that time, there was no metaverse to speak of because it wasn't such a buzz yet. But then we're starting to see that as more and more people start to understand augmentation, start to understand VR, they start to understand that actually the whole interaction with augmented content and virtual content is quite a natural thing because human to human interaction is usually spatial. We would love for everyone to be physically seated in a room and I could turn to everyone and see everyone eye to eye. I think that's where the yearning and where the wish of trying to encapsulate the immersion of human to human contact comes into the picture. And so I think with the understanding that, oh, now VR can adopt multi-user. I put it on and I see, Marina and Daya in VR in front of me as avatars. I can wave to them. I can go up to them and do a fist bump. I think that whole VR experience in the last 3 years has really opened up people's eyes and expressions and contact and understanding to the level of immersive technologies and how they're able to interact a lot more spatially as well. And while that is kind of like a very good thing, then the whole design would come into question. So how would I pick up an object? How would I show that the object is interactable? How would I show that object is not interactable? So while we did have a lot of experience trying to do this as custom applications for clients, when it comes to interactions within the new space, like for example, the metaverse, then we need to understand these things are not really very common to many people, especially if they don't have a VR background. But I think one of the things that we are quite excited about is the fact that almost everybody is on an equal playing field when we talk about experiences in designing what would work in the metaverse. Although we have seen from the past that people who with UI and UX background in mobile apps and websites tend to pick up user experience and design in XR fairly quickly. That being said, there's still a lot of learning and a lot of experiencing for those traditional UX designers to put on the headsets many times to understand many different applications to find that, for example, I pick up a cube and then I see that the cube has a color outline, and that denotes that I can use my controllers to manipulate the outline of the cube to make it bigger or smaller. So these are subtle things that is really not formally taught in a lot of schools. It's only when you start to experience like maybe 100 hours of games in VR, another 200 hours of applications, then you start to see what other people have done. And when you go and speak to them, you realize that these other people also adopt a little bit of a trial and error. I pick up a cube and I want the users to interact with it, but I cannot put a sign that goes, pull this apart, or make this bigger, because that's not very immersive. So they started to look at some of these designs from the perspective of making intuitive via the things that we commonly kind of know, colors. Red means probably, either don't touch this or maybe pay attention. And then change color, for example, when you use green and you go near it, it changes to yellow. And little things like that would actually be somewhat evolved as the de facto designs of how we look at immersive content and applications and products today. So coming back to the question, I think one of the things that helped me through this journey was me and my team really spending a lot of time to understand the whole immersive design from the XR perspective first. Then suddenly, during COVID, which is, I guess by now everybody would know, the biggest disruptor of technology and human behavior and traditional life as we know it, propel a whole new interesting path into what we call the metaverse now. And suddenly there's a lot of tech companies that are in this space and wanting to craft, a new direction for it, for what we call the new web or the next phase of the internet. So I think from where we're coming from, and if you look very deeply, XR is one component of this metaverse. There are many other components which many people would say, would fill up these gaps, and decentralization, cryptocurrency, blockchain is one of them. But ultimately, a lot of these other things are the layers that the foundation needs to be built on. Visually, the design would still come from XR, because our entire wish list is that hopefully by Web3, we wouldn't be staring at a flat screen every time we want to interact with somebody. And while Zoom does the job, it is also not very naturalistic. So I think there were some of these ideas that we experience through really spatial interaction as human to human, face to face, that we slowly start to understand that this should be the way to go, and technology need to catch up. So I think that's the journey that we're adopting, and every day we are still learning about some of these evolution of the immersive designs that will come into the metaverse.
That's amazing. I really like your points about lots of people experimenting while doing, and this is something that is happening, and this is why we actually building this community, because the knowledge in this field is being built and collected and developed now, and sharing this knowledge actually helps us to come up with the best patterns in user experience. So going back to the metaverse topic, what does it take to build a metaverse? It's probably like such a huge project, but like, can you eliminate on that, and like what kind of design work does it involve to build something as huge as metaverse?
I think on an everyday basis, I do get asked this quite a lot, and every time I try to answer, I try my best to break it down to the simplest form. I would probably start with the same common understanding of info that most people get. If you want to go to a website, you go to a flat screen and you type in the domain name, and then the content will pull up on a flat screen. And you interact by scrolling up and down, and probably click to the next page. And as much as I guess the whole world is very comfortable and very familiar with such an interaction with websites, essentially, again, coming back to my last point, it's a little bit not counterintuitive, because humans don't stare. We're not supposed to stare at the flat screen, in our daily interactions, and hopefully not, and when we interact with people, right? So I think there is now a big push, especially with COVID having such a big factor of people having to stare at screens for the whole day and lacking that human interaction, like in the office, for example, where you turn to your neighbor or your colleague on your left and right, and that kind of spatial interaction is there. There is sort of a germination, or I guess a whole ideology that's being brought up there, that people are looking for the next wave of internet, because it's time for some of these spatial interactions to catch up. And the idea then stems from the fact that the metaverse could be the answer, because in virtual worlds, we could try to bring in a shopping experience, a learning experience, and so on and so forth. So I think when you start to see what has transpired over the past few months, the tech companies are all in, because which tech company can ignore, the evolution of the next internet? Probably nobody. But back to the explanation, if you can imagine going to a website that's now treated virtual with spatial interaction, where you're no longer an outsider looking in, because at websites you kind of are, and you have an avatar in there, because the avatar can actually jump and fist bump, and what we call emote, right? You can actually hit a lot of buttons to allow your avatar to express emotion. But more importantly, the avatar sort of lowers your inhibition of trying to socialize as well. So that's why you see a lot of definitions of the metaverse being a social space. whereby it doesn't feel as intimidating as going up to somebody and saying hi, as opposed to now I would just click on Danny and go hi. You might think it's a bit funny. So I think there were some of these things that people starting to understand that the avatar breaks down a lot of barriers. And most importantly, I can use the avatar as a proxy because I can be in there and turn left and right, and I can hit the button and do fist bump, totally get into the social groove, and then understand the virtual world is about learning, training, shopping, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, I think the current envisioning is that the metaverse are actually different website destinations that will probably evolve over time. And I find this so exciting because then we don't have to, be relegated to typing in a domain name and going to a flat screen. You're kind of like jumping into a 360 space where your avatar is roaming around and going to shops and checking things out. And I guess that the whole experience seems to take on a very different form. And that's how I think where this is currently going. But to add on to that, we kind of know that this whole virtual 360 space in 3D is not new. And that's why we always get a lot of backlash and counter arguments from gamers, for example. They're like, I've been gaming for the last 30 years. Nothing of this is new. To that we cannot argue because what they say is true. But I think what is different is the fact that now we are going into a virtual space without objective to kill zombies. Without an objective to capture the flag or fight the big boss at the end. It's nothing like that. And it's so different because our objective will depend on the purpose of the metaverse world, whether it's social shopping, whether it's coming together to learn, whether it's to attend, an arts festival, which has happened so many times during COVID. And Cannes had this in a very big way as well. They had Cannes XR, which you only can experience in a metaverse type of environment. And then different components started to evolve, which is things like NFTs, where digital ownership come in, and so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of where I see the trajectory of where it's going. And to me, the metaverse is a journey that will eventually lead us to Web3. It's only anybody's guess right now where Web3 is going to go because hardware seems to be catching up with software, or hardware seems to be catching up with our desire for the next internet. But I think if we put everything aside and think about what we desire as the ultimate internet, then I think those are some of the targets that we can actually think about the designs and the development and the exciting plans that we might put together to see how we can make it happen together.
I think it's really an exciting time for design because, as you said, screens and buttons is something that we taught ourselves to interact with, but the actual human interaction happens in 3D space and spatial environment. And immersive technologies enabling the interaction in this environment is actually a very interesting time for design to get reborn and get more user-centric than ever. And speaking of user experience, of course, immersive technologies these days are not as widely adopted as we have the adoption of smartphones or tablets or computers, which are the space for flat design, right? Yep. So, who is the user that you're designing for? Who is your user persona, or the users that you build your products for? Can you illuminate on that?
Yeah. I mean, in the early days of Immersively, when we were doing a little bit more bespoke, customized applications for business, we were focused on business to business. At times, we were business to business to customers or consumers. But because it's business to business, the main objective of the design is largely focused on the industry itself, whether it's training for welding, whether it's for the museum, for example, because they want people to understand what is it like to step into the past and visit history, for example. So a lot of the times, the design would come from the genre itself, which is a really good starting point and foundation. Because if you know it's for a welding company, the users are probably experienced in this particular industry, then there are a lot of design elements you can use so that they will pick up quite easily. So for example, when they pick up a tool and you press the button, they will expect to see it being lit up. So they know that there's something they have to press, and you don't have to point an arrow to say, pick this up. For the consumer that's not familiar, you probably need an arrow to say this is your first thing that you need to do. So there are some of these things which will be very different between B2C and B2B. But that being said, the B2C is where, because you are doing an experience for everybody, then you have to think of some of the common things that will be commonly used to help everybody get into the experience. And one of the things that I think my team at the time was really ignoring or overlooked, and then we realized it's such a powerful design element, because we are so attuned to design being visual, that we realize that actually design is also audio. So when you pick up the headset or you use AR, you hear a voice that will say hello, and then suddenly it guides you into the visuals kind of. So these are different mix and balances of things at our disposal that we can use. And we'd be surprised that actually voice is quite immersive, because that brings you to that sense about where to look and things like that. And particularly in some of our early works, we did binaural audio, which is spatial audio. So you hear sound coming from a left and right, and then you turn your headset. So these are all the different clues that helps with the immersive design as well. Then they're able to understand, oh, I have to turn here to do this. Then you understand that there's something for you to turn on, for example. So we are very clear that we don't want to superimpose something that looks terrible. Like you put on a headset, there's a big arrow that says turn to your right, and then you got to, and you have all these arrows that are telling you what to do. It's just, so we use some of these spatial audios to start with, and then it picks up from there. So I think that's one of the important parts to think about. But I think also to add on to that as well, before Facebook, Oculus really given us the opportunity to try some of these applications during the early days, and of course now we know they have new headsets coming up. Nobody would expect that some of these designs would evolve. And if you look back into the history of technology, this is also something that's happened, and we are very aware of it. Nowadays, you wouldn't buy any phone that has got actual buttons. There may be some people that holds on to their blueberries, for example, because they like the button so much. But you know that technology is gone, and every phone now is a touch screen. And if you go back a little bit more, before blueberries and touch screen, all phones only had a small screen and buttons. So I think the evolution of hardware is the journey that we must all take, and the design evolution will follow accordingly. Now we must wear hardware headsets, and because that's where current technology is. But who's to say what's going to happen next? I can't say. I only know that there are really big resources and rich companies at work trying to better the experience for the next generation. So we need to naturally allow these hardware to take its course, but at the same time, jump into this exciting world and see what the whole phase of evolution of design is, so that we can follow the journey and even propose some of your own, like for example, voice that just came out, and allow us to actually recommend it to our customers and our clients. So I think that's the exciting part of where we are currently, in at the moment.
The multi-sensory interaction, right? We've been doing this a lot while designing immersive experiences in a physical space. But when it comes to virtual space, I think the very important element there is also like we are not physically present in virtual space. We are physically present by proxy, which is avatar. Yeah. What's your experience with that, and in terms of user experience for the avatar, or how people behave being an avatar? Does it change the ethics? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think on that note, we also look at how gamers will come in and say, there's no big deal about avatars because I've been using them, 30 years ago when I played games. So we kind of see the whole world being very split with this current, projection and the roadmap for where avatars and virtual world now. But I think today, somehow or other, we see more genuine users using avatars in their likeness, as compared to previously, a lot of people try to hide behind their avatars and try to be someone different. But that being said, you will, in all technologies, and in fact, in all aspects of life, there's going to be security issues, privacy issues. I mean, even traditional banks, which has been around for hundreds of years, are still experiencing your security issues like hacks and all that, let alone a new technology. So I don't think these things are going away. And anybody who raised the red flag to say, oh, you know, in the metaverse, there are all lots of security issues, so we shouldn't use it. It's almost good as saying the banks are also facing security issues, so you shouldn't use it. I think the fact is we need to embrace and understand some of these red flags. And if you have a very big desire for them, then do something about it. But I think the fact is because it is undergoing these issues, then we know that there is a part to play. It is going to evolve as it being part of our lives because these are the things that, you know, will come up with any new technologies. And some of these things, the companies themselves, they are really trying to do something about it. So like in VR, there is now a safe distancing circle that you cannot go directly to another avatar to get within the closed space. And there are a lot of these things that are coming up. You know, there's now an emote button that you can raise a hand to say, don't come any closer and things like that. So I think as tech evolves, so does the tech etiquette or, you know, the interaction etiquette. And again, this would be something quite interesting for designers to explore. What is the safety emotes that you can think of? How would you come in to propose the safety aspects? Would your avatar come in and there will be a lot of voice that tells you these are the safety guidelines? Is that the way to go? Or when you start to enter the virtual world, then all the safety is rolled out to you. I think these are great opportunities for people to start to explore, you know, how they can implement some of their design principles and ideas.
Yeah, that's definitely something interesting that is happening in development. When we talk about talent and skills, so this is all so new and everybody's experimenting. How do you make sure you bring the right talent for your team to build something as complex as Metaverse? What kind of backgrounds are you looking for to make sure people actually can embrace, jump into these fields and come up with great findings and be able to design a great experience?
So I think like all webinars and talks, we save the hardest question for the last question. So this will be the hardest question to answer because I think none of us are HR specialists, and I think to attempt to answer this question will be very tricky because the attendees themselves could be HR practitioners. But I would say it's very hard, you know, because we have seen people that weren't in XR before, and because of their passion, they're doing very well. We have seen people that are very experienced mobile and tablet UI UX designers. Now they're doing very well doing XR design and Metaverse design. So I think the passion for something is one thing to get you off the ground, but some kind of a foundation that you had previously would be the added advantage, whether it's a traditional web UI designer that now wants to explore Metaverse design. It's really about diving deep in and experiencing it, and the age old saying of your 10,000 hours of practice, you know. And for me, it's like 6 years of putting on headsets and seeing different applications to explore different people's design to find our own. So it takes a lot of these things to become seasoned at something. But with the passion and some kind of a background that you have started with in the past, will probably get you a better head start. But I think today, you know, with again COVID, there are a lot of talents that are now working remotely, and there are a lot of companies and startups which are very happy to look for talents remotely. I think that whole area of learning and talent skills is completely shifted. I know of many companies with locals without the skill set working alongside remote talents with the skill set, and they're learning together, which, you know, pre-COVID was kind of unheard of. So there are a lot of these, I think, combinations of talents coming together in this particular space that is really quite exciting. And I really look forward to, you know, learning from everybody else that's also well-versed in various aspects of this space as well.
That's very exciting. I think that pretty much anybody can jump in the fields and make a contribution these days. I think I have another 100 questions to you, Lionel, but let's, at this point, let's open the floor for Q&A. We have questions from audience, and we'll have another 10-15 minutes to answer that. So I'll hand over to Daria, who's been looking after that.
Yeah, here I am. Hey. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Happy to see you. Also, yeah, we have a question from Francesco. So, Lionel, do you think to wear a visor is more natural than staring at a flat screen? By visor, I think Francesco means a headset. Yeah.
Headset. Yeah, thanks, Francesco. I sort of saw that question and I attempted to try to answer that before that. I think the headset is a little bit akin to, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time where there were mobile phones the size of a brick. It has buttons and the big antenna that's coming out of it, and there was no flat touch screen. There was a little screen that is digitally and is green, and it basically tells you your buttons. And there was a number of years where people were using that kind of handphone. And it was the handphone that people were carrying around and it cannot be fit into your pocket. But they were very proudly carrying. Do you know what I'm talking about? The big handphone? Yeah. So I think those times have, of course, flown by, and today we look at a touchscreen. Thanks, Francesco. If you own one now, I think it's antique and people are going to auction it for a lot of money. But when we were at a time, nobody would have predicted that we would now be carrying flat touchscreen phones in everybody's pockets, around the world at any one time. So I think it's crazy that when we are in the current time, we often can't see what's going to happen next time. And when there was a time when Nokia was around, everybody swore by the fact that the phone must have buttons, physical buttons, and they cannot imagine anything else. And of course, we know what happened, after that. So I think, to me, the current headsets is a transition. I won't say it is like the phone with the antenna and looks like a brick. Probably a little bit like the Nokia era, maybe, not as refined, but it's definitely not the final. And we are constantly moving towards something like the final. It's only a little bit more tricky because the headset requires optics, projection, and sensors for it to be spatial and interactive. Those kinds of things are still quite bulky and expensive to put together. So it will need a bit of time, I think, for this to be evolved. But if you ask me what it would be the dream like, I think the dream would be like, glasses maybe, or a little projector in the house or in every house, wherever you want to talk to people, there's a hologram of Marina and Daya will just be projecting. They will be using webcam and it will be a sort of like a 2.5 projection, whereby they will be almost simulated holograms that you can interact with. And you don't need a flat screen because they're holograms on your left and right. It could be something like that. I don't know. But I think the fact is everybody is very interested to want to move into a better direction than what we are now, or what we call the next phase of the internet is where it gets very exciting.
Thanks, Lionel. Francesca, hopefully answered your question. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And we have one more question from Chen. She says, I am a heavy Metaverse user. I really like to stay in the Metaverse because I can play, socialize, go to exhibitions, etc., do many things inside, but I see some people, companies, resist to get in. They even want to go back to the working in the office mode. So how do we solve it? How to convince people to change?
Wow, that's a hard one. I think when you set out to want to change people, then it gets very difficult. Because most people are resistant to change. I always try to introduce people by appealing to what they are passionate about. So again, I go back to during COVID, when we couldn't travel, and there was many events online. One of the things that I think was really exciting was the number of these fashion events and arts-related events that were only available in VR. So for example, there is a fashion festival and there was Cannes XR, which was only available in VR. And that could be an entry point for you to tell your friend, hey, there's a fashion festival that I want you to check out. Interested? So you use some of these ideas of events that, it's a little bit more appealing to many. And when you go, yeah, where did we go? Well, we can't go anywhere now, but I have a headset, you want to try? So I think those would be the first openers, I guess, for people to step in and try. And for gamers, I guess you don't really have to convince them quite a bit. There are numerous games now in the Oculus Store that they can try. But for me, I have really introduced a lot of people within XR and the Metaverse space because of some of these identifiable, passions like fashion festival, arts festival, and then they want to go in and try. And then once they have done that, you can start to introduce them to more stuff, like work and so on and so forth. So I think those things will probably take some time. And it's great that you are a Metaverse user as well. I would add on to the fact that when I first heard about the news of during COVID, people couldn't travel and people went into using a VR application. And on New Year's Eve, a lot of strangers who have never met each other wore headsets, came in as avatars, joined a really big space, and they were doing countdown in VR. I thought that was beautiful. It's like it took COVID for that to happen, which I thought it was great. So I think these things will take some time. But once we start sharing them to everybody, people might think, oh yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. And then we start to see more and more people maybe open up.
Yeah, thanks, Lionel. The next question is kind of related to the previous one, asked by JR. Hi, Lionel. Realistically speaking, what are the chances of the normal public losing interest in the metaverse and let the whole thing die out?
Very, very likely. I think that question is it's a little bit tied to the previous, which is about changing human behavior. And and I guess I don't have to convince anybody, it took COVID to change a lot of behaviors. And some behaviors didn't go back to the previous because we have changed. So a lot of times it takes something as serious or as powerful as the pandemic to change human behavior, then we go that way. And right now, because there's nothing compelling us to go into the metaverse, now that we are almost post-COVID, you will see the roadmap for users to go into COVID taking a lot longer. I can sort of predict for you that today, touch wood, if airports are all closed and you cannot travel, the number of virtual users is going to spike because they got no choice. And now with a choice and countries opening up, we see that dip again. But the tech companies are jumping in because they don't want to miss the boat. And they're also not prepared because they cannot tell you that they have all the virtual worlds already developed. So they are very interested to start working on them now. So that by the time, everybody's ready and more people are coming in, you can start to visit all these worlds that these tech companies have developed. So I think that's kind of the thing that I see the landscape that's being mapped out currently. It's a good thing that people don't rush into it now because they want to travel and resume, kinds of the habit that they missed for the last 2 years. But it also gives companies the time to build something now so that people will be able to be introduced to them at a later stage. But I think the one thing that the public is probably not going to lose interest is that everybody is keen to look at what is interesting that will impact their lives. So for example, designers rush into NFTs because now they can own it. People rush into designing avatars because it's suddenly become a newsworthy thing. So the creator economy has suddenly got bigger than just like streamers and YouTubers. It is given life to a lot of designers who now owns collectible NFTs. So I think there are different facets of these things that are really starting to take interest among different aspects of our various artistic disciplines. But as the general public, then you'll find people that are not creative or not creators, but they like this person's work. So they are followers. So I think that's the ecosystem. I know for a fact that people didn't used to go on Twitter to follow NFT artists. Now there are a lot more. So these things will take time, but I think everybody will be part of something in time to come. And not everybody is a creator, but everybody will love to be passionate about something and follow a creator. That also could be part of the interest that is probably going to evolve as well.
Thanks, Lionel. I think we have time for one more question, right?
Dr. Daniel?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, from Daniel. He asks, do you have a favorite source for VR XR design tips, like the outline to show a cube can be transformed?
I was going to go, there are more tips and design skills. There's webinars is coming up from IDA. So you must subscribe and keep yourself updated about the upcoming programs that Marina and Daya are going to roll out. But but I would say, you know, like all things, the favorite ones and the best ones are probably going to be the ones that you're going to experience next. I know it's not really a very, you know, a good answer or response to that, but I'm constantly surprised by the fact that a lot of stuff that are experiencing are new stuff that I didn't expect before. I'll give you a really geeky answer. If you are a gamer, you probably heard of Half-Life. And Half-Life came out with a new VR game called Half-Life Alyx. And it was an entire open world game whereby almost everything could be interactable. That was something that in the design space was unheard of. But they don't make it so obvious that the objects are in color when you approach them. They basically just make the environment and the objects as realistic as possible, so that when you start the journey, so you know what I'm talking about. You kind of feel like you are physically / virtually in that world. And like now I'm in my room, I can pick up my bottle and I will start to experiment and pick up stuff. And because it's by you know, the creators of Half-Life, they've made it in such a way that everything is intuitive. If it's an object, you can pick it up. If it's the wall, you cannot. You know, it's so much become second nature and trying to mirror your actual life. And I thought that would be such a breakthrough example of design where they don't put colors and hints around what you need to do, but because the entire content is a mirror of your life as a human. So when you are dropped into this virtual world to play a game, you just function as you were, except you are in an apocalyptic world rather than in the country that you're in. You know, I thought that was a super great example, which is a little bit hard to beat, you know, in terms of following where their design principles come from.
Thanks, Lionel, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Stay tuned for our upcoming events and training courses, and we'll see you soon.